Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out, let people know I've gone live. It's pretty amazing, that I'm able to come in here at this time of night. I've been into my lives, I was feeling bad because I wasn't coming into my lives and re-watching them because I was yapping for so long. And sometimes my lives they are long, right? And so they backpiled. Is that what you call them? And I had a little stack of them, and I hadn't even gotten those lessons for myself and feeling bad, right? Sometimes I understand when it's um a legitimate reason to feel upset with myself or to feel like I've let myself down. And those are legitimate ones, right? There's lots of those ones that I have, right? I just feel bad, even if it's not my fault. It's got nothing to do with Canadian. That just compounds the fact, right? But, sometimes I come in here and, I feel bad that I'm not taking in my own lessons. And I get a lot out of them myself. And so I spent a whole afternoon and I caught up, and it's not like I have to go in there and watch the whole one. Sometimes, where I know where Cindy kind of steps in and starts yapping about whatever's going on in her day. And then, right, I know I can slip out. But I always get something. I always get something. That's the most wonderful thing about being your own parent. That's what it is. It's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. Been on my topic list for a while now. I'm going to do it in a casual cup of coffee kind of way. Oh, it's tea tonight. I'm cutting back on the coffee. I'm doing really good, you guys. No coffee yesterday, no coffee today, just drinking the tea and my backup. Oh, you guys, the heat wave. We're having such a heat wave. And I'm thinking, oh, the humidity's got to be like at 80%. And I looked and it's only like at 40%. I don't know maybe it's because it's so dry, but it did spit a little bit yesterday. So it can't be just dry out there. But that heat. It's getting me and it's getting my cat. And I'm going to assume that, at least on this part of the sphere that we're in a heat wave in a lot of places. It is summertime. July is the hottest of the hottest, but it's just the beginning of July, you guys. Just the beginning of July. Okay, so let's just come right back to the main branch. And I said I wanted to talk about self parenting, you know, and it's nobody's fault. It is in that evolution. It is in learning from our mistakes. It's not understanding until we understand it, right? And everybody does the best that they can. I i recognize that. I even recognize that in those difficult dynamic relationships that just truly messed me up, right? It messed me up. And I have to look at that and I could say a lot of it was the fear, a lot of it was the judgment, a lot of it was the guilt, right? And kind of that passing down the line. And even in my own state, it is accepting, right? It is in the upbringing uh, that we learn to be the people that we are. But no fault to our ourselves. But sometimes that parenting isn't being done so well. Even if they loved you, even if they wanted you, and even if there were some great aspects. When you get things wrong, you get things wrong. I look at communities, and I've been a participant in conversations. It's one of my favorite things. You guys know it's one of my favorite things to do is yapping and listening and being a student, and actually being a participant in the conversation and taking it interest in it to the state where I'm looking for solutions. I'm being creative and looking at ideas. And, it is in our interactions with others that we pick up our habits, right? Our way of living. Just take a look at your friends growing up. If you look at your friends growing up, you could see that in that rubbing with each other, you kind of moved with each other. I'm going to use my niece as an example in that, only because it's such a beautiful example and I know she wouldn't mind. I come from a dynamic family. I worry for the nieces and nephews. I worry for what we're going to pass down. Not like it was so terrible. We all played our roles. Some had it easier than others. It wasn't always bad, even for myself, right? But sometimes in that balance, right, we cause ourselves issues and others causes issues, even unintentionally. I come from one of those dynamic families. I had two parents on the extremes, a father who was very sensitive and a mother who was very controlling, narcissistic, borderline. It like you could put labels on these personalities, but because we're such a mix these days, because we have parentage and grandparentage that are all from different cultures and traditions and stuff, and it's all compounded into the next generation, and right, and a lot of those ideas are not right. In fact, a lot of those ideas are outright devastating. uh you know as a baby boomer myself, I our generation, we were quite left to our own demise. My parents were second generation or third generation Canadian, so that makes me fourth generation Canadian. Um, but, right, there are two sets, and those sets are intertwining and interacting and interbreeding with other relation relations that are from different cultures and traditions and stuff. And people can get really mixed up. People can become very judgmental, very defensive, because especially when it comes to religion, right? We have very passionate ideas about how we have those relations in our faiths, and lots of times that could butt head. It didn't butt head in my family. My father was spiritual. My mother loved Jesus, right? But it caused issues within the family because I was my father's daughter. I should have swung that way much sooner than I did, right? I would have loved to have had some of these conversations with my father. Oh, he would have been just absolutely so enthralled. It must have been a very lonely, stressful, anxiety, but probably full of joy and anticipation and optimism and hope and just love for life, because that's what my dad was all about. And if you don't know, I have these conversations all the time, but just to fill you in a little bit about my dad. had congenital heart failure. He was diagnosed in his late teens before he became even adult. He never even thought that he would have the opportunity to get married and have children. And as things fell together by circumstances, and I'm grateful that my father told me some of these stories. It made it easier for me to put pieces together and have better understanding and put myself in their shoes so that I could feel out situations, conversations, and reason whys. But we're talking about parenthood tonight. Hello, Eugene. Thank you. I'm very good tonight. Hope you're good too. Uh, yeah. So we're talking about parenting. I really held it against my mother. It's much easier for me now because I say things like, well, that's just her evolution. She is just not evolved yet. That's true, but I believe in the epigenetics. I believe in those traditions and those cultures and those generations before us and how they imprint on us, right? That I recognize that there was also something else, and she should have known, right? She should have known. And there is no excuse. I even find myself in having this conversation trying to butter it and making it smooth and stuff, not to mum batter, right? That's the guilt and the shame. That's the bad daughter in me. But I have to recognize in putting myself in my mother's shoes that my mother was a bad mother, right? And now, because I put myself in her shoes, I understand why she was a bad mother, right? And she never wanted to be a mother in truth, right? She really resented that, that she didn't get to have a life because she was bringing up kids that she really didn't want, that those passions. She was an artist. She loved art, right? That dream of being an artist was maybe taken away from her, right? That she had to share the affection of her husband with her children because my father was so highly sensitive that, his family meant everything to him. He never thought that he was going to get to have the opportunity to have children, and he did it. And there are circumstances and stories in the relationship that I know of that play into all of this. But those hugs and those kisses and those attention and those caring, loving relationships that the children had with their father was very frustrating for my mother because it was something, because of the cultures, the traditions, and her upbringing that she didn't get to experience, right? That she really resented her kids for taking her man away from her. And I was having such a rough time of it that I had become very codependent on my father. I wanted to be around him all the time, right? He was probably the only person in my life for the most part of my childhood and teenage years, and that's the honest truth. I'm going to say my sisters too, but my sisters were involved with their own lives and in their own friendships, right? So, in talking about parentage, and just to give an example, using my own family as that understanding, that I have to be the evidence, I have to be the um, the teacher in this because I was the experiencer in this, and in my lessons, I've come to learn my purpose comes from my pain, right? So I really, really do want to help the sensitives. I am my father's daughter, and those sensitive, those highly impacted by those dynamic relationships that have made them so wired to be secluded, right? Because we make these cages ourselves, these boxes ourselves. There are safe zones. This, right, where I'm sitting right now, this is my safe zone, right? Let me have a sip of my coffee and get my. We're talking about parenting today. It's a top, Eugene, but thank you for saying so. Oh, good cup of tea. Oh, I used to say that with the coffee too. Oh, I make such a good cup of coffee. It's nice to get the coffee out of my system for a little while. We'll see if it benefits me in any way. But if it doesn't benefit me in any way, at least I know it's not causing me any serious issues. And we'll just go back to coffee because I do love my coffee. I was doing 2 cups of coffee, but then I ran out of coffee and I says, well, let's just buy a bag of tea bags and let's just see if we can do tea for a little while. And I've been doing tea for 2 days now and I'm doing perfectly fine. The heat's helping because I'm drinking mostly juice, right? But this is my first tea because you guys know I like to have my coffee cups with me when I do my live show. It's maybe a little bit of a um, autistic trait. I think it's an autistic trait where you become habitual in that, right? That you become very um, wired into habits and possessions and routine. And I am that way. I know it doesn't look like it, but you know, growing up in that dynamic family, I got to be 50-50. I got to be a mix of two extremes, and I got to be the experiencer in that. And I have to say, that I may have rejected my mother really early, just out of that fear, right? Out of not feeling safe, not feeling loved. That I did become my father's daughter that way. And my father was right, we didn't have company at the house. He had a few right outside of his work, like when it was work, like the most social people in the whole world. But when it was off time, that was me time. And this is the way that I live my life too, right? I'm so grateful for this bit of me time, this bit of space that I have in between jobs, that I can actually apply myself and still feel like, it is me time, because I couldn't imagine. And I've done it, right? You work full time and then you're taking in the lessons and you're interacting and you're practicing your craft online and in person, right? In what you do, in everything you do, whether it's interactions with your family, your neighbors, with strangers walking down the street, your coworkers, right? Your friends. We're all rubbing up to each other. And that is influence, and that is follow the leader, that is in that codependency too, to some degree, right? Or right, it's, to me, like I said, I was very codependent. And if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know how codependent I was in my relationships. And I was very singular in my relationships. I have been all my life. I can't say I could not handle lots of friends at one time, because I did end up on in big groups that I created myself. Well, I guess they just that snowball effect between you and one friend, and then somebody else is introduced, and then that person's going out with that person, and then that right? So I did end up in those groups, even our work groups and stuff. So, you know, I'm very grateful for those jobs that I had in hospitality, that I learned to interact, to have conversations, right? And even though this is a one-way conversations, I hope it's not a one-way conversation, but you know what I mean, that I'm it's just me sitting here yibber yabbering. I don't have a guest. I'm not doing an interview, and I'm not being interviewed in that. That's just, you know, on Instagram there, kind of did it a little bit. I didn't like it, right? But I was doing it because I felt I had to do what was hard, what I was afraid of. And after a while I come to realize I wasn't afraid of it. I just was aware that I didn't like it, right? And it had nothing to do with being uncomfortable or anything. And so, I understood that that was probably not the route that I was going to go. This vlogging format suits me fine because I never know where my life is going to take me day to day, let alone from one week to another or one year to another. And that's the truth. And so if my brand is sticking with me, it has to be a part of my life because I have no idea from one moment to the next what it's going to look like. And that's like for most people. But when you have one goal, one dream, one ambition, right? That's that's the focus there. For me, I do a lot of this for my future. Isn't that funny? Being just a few years, I think, being eligible for retirement if I wanted to retire. But you know how it is. You got to put a roof over your head, and those pensions are not big enough technically to put a roof over your head. And I enjoy what I do. I want to stay active. I believe that activeness is what makes it so that we don't shut down, right? And I get that because I get those feelings of shutting down after you go all all winter in winter boots, and then in the summer you put on a new pair of shoes and you're going for walks again, and you're not doing as good as you were doing the year before, right? So these are the signals to me, right? That I am maturing in that. And so in these signals, I have to recognize that, I can't be that urban explorer. I can't be that back road explorer, but I can do other things. And, in mixing everything together, that my passions together, my loves together, what I feel I need to do, mix it all in together, that I could create something pretty amazing. But the brand would have to go along with that. And I gave it some thought, and it's that vlogging format, right? The videos, I like the videos too. I would prefer somebody else did the videos for me. For me, that is something that I do, and I don't give up in it because even though I don't care for it, it's important to my brand. And so I do what is essential, what I have to do, what I think is most important to keep moving forward in that. Okay, let's bring it back to the main branch because we were talking about parenting, right? A couple of my favorite creators on YouTube, and actually, I've been with them for years. As long as some of you have been with me, I have been with them. Uh, One of them is Victor Otto. He is a creator. He works in spirituality. I think he works more with the stars and the eclipses and those kind of things. And I happened on to a friend of his, and it just led me to him. Just the way it worked out, it just led me to him. And I've been with him ever since, and he has helped me out tremendously in understanding the the craziness sometimes of what we're doing, because a lot of what we're doing takes a lot of belief, and sometimes it takes some time to get to that belief. You have your base, right? Your base beliefs, but then there are lots of other things that come across your path, and you feel it's something, right, that you're supposed to be able to understand and believe in very easily, to be able to fall into it. But because, again, my culture, that upbringing I had, those dynamics in my parents' relationships, and being in the two extremes, and me stuck in the middle, right? And trying to be the appeaser for what was hurting me, and being the helpless to the one that loved me, right? And you know, I got stuck there, and it offered up challenges. I'm not gonna say it didn't, because it offered me up lots of difficulties, because of course, in rubbing up against my mother, there were experiences and traits and traditions and stuff that rubbed in, and even on my father's side, right? Because I love my father so much, and because I was rejected by mother, of course, right? In that communion that I was at the time, not understanding, right? That I'm not supposed to sort myself out to make somebody else feel comfortable. But I did that in my codependency. And, I built myself, you know, uh, and I let myself be influenced by the way that my father lived, right? And how my father understood. We had different we had different heroes when it came to the people in our lives who we admired. And my dad was a Carl Sagan and a David Suzuki, Pierre Trudeau, not Justin Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau. And then for myself, oh my goodness, I was such a mishmash, right? Because again, in those dynamics and cultures, and my mother dragged us off to church and all kinds. She loved Jesus, but she didn't know which denomination Jesus truly belonged to, and we just kind of dabbled in all of them, right? So I feel those pulls in a lot of those lessons, and that's okay, because those lessons are the same no matter what religion or spiritual idea you're working with. It's pretty much the same in that. But it caused me issues because I was my father's daughter, and that's just not the way I wanted to swing. That's not that was right. I understand, and I'm supposed to move with the majority that way, but you know, I believe that the majority of my feelings are the majority, and in the end that rules above anything else, right? The greatest poles, the greatest fears, those are the ones that are important in our lives, important to reflect and resolve, right? And other ones that those are the follow me's, and those are the bright stars, and those are the good influences. So, yeah, so in talking about good parentship, one of the things that I admired so much about Victor Otto was the fact that he uh, he felt always in his past that possibly he was a bad father. If you follow Victor Otto, you would know he is an amazing father. He has a beautiful family. His kids don't come online with him very often. He talks about them. He loves on them. He what do you call that? He encompasses them, like in that nurturing way, and in that stable, realistic way. And it's hard to be stable and balanced and realistic in some of these lessons that some of us move in, right? So I really admired that. But he had this idea that maybe in a past that he had been a bad father, and he felt he was maybe overcompensated, overprotective, worried too much about his children in this life because of what he thought he had done to his children in a past life. It hit me, right? I'd already been with him for years already, but when he said that, he had me for forever, and he'll have my admiration in that forever, because that's what it's all about, in recognizing the mistakes and then resolving them, doing better by yourself. You're creating the best human being you possibly can. But we're nowhere's close to being close to that even, and yet we're making that movement, right? Here's another one that I really admire, and that is Dr. Gabor Mate. Now, he's very much a realist. He's a psychologist, and he's pretty renowned, so some of you probably know who he is. But he admittedly, right, uh, encompassed and expressed to the whole world that he was no doubt a bad parent. Right? I just love these people because they're making movement. Those souls are making movement. This is our next stage of evolution, so that we can understand what we're doing to our children, right? Whether intentionally or unintentionally. But if it's intentionally, that's only not only going to hurt the children, it's going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt your soul's movement. And a big part of his work is to sharing that message in his own experience of not being a good parent, and you know yelling at his wife, and not caring about his kids, letting them live their own lives, and he was living his own life. And how he didn't really get to know his kids until his kids were almost grown, and now his daughter actually works with him. It's so amazing. It's so amazing. And we need more. We need all, actually. But in this beginning stage of this next stage of this evolution that we're moving into, we're getting to know everybody. We're getting to know all the cultures, all the religions, all the different family traditions and stuff. And it's only in recognizing and being a spectator and a student and a participant in what's not like us that we're going to be able to come up with some kind of baseline, so that we can all move within that, knowing that we are properly contained, properly taken care of, and properly nurtured, right? And if you have a nurtured versus nature, and that's the truth. And that was a big part of what Dr. Gabor Mate, that he's teaching people that you know you don't leave it for the next generation. And you can hope that the kids will say, oh my goodness, I don't want my kids to ever experience that again. But then they overcompensate, right, for what um, for what their parents didn't offer up to them, like my father overcompensating to me for what my mother couldn't do for me, and what she did do to me, right? And I'm just talking for myself, right? Dynamic family. I wasn't the only one in that family, and we all have issues, but we all have issues. And that's the thing that people don't understand, that we're not even close to being at the beginning of all of this, right? But we're off to a good start if we can get to that point where we could take care of what we're bringing into the world, right? That possibly my life might look different. I don't think so. The way it works out is the way it's supposed to work out. I get that, right? I accept that. But at the same time, we are offered up choices. And in choices, there is always change, right? There's always the potential for change in that. Even if it's momentary, as soon as you make that thought, right? That's my last cigarette tonight. And you go to bed thinking, oh my goodness, I'm never going to have another cigarette. And you get up and it's your first cigarette. That's still movement towards that idea of not being a smoker. I just use that as an analogy because that's what I did when I quit smoking. I did it for years. I didn't even start smoking until I was 27 years old. And I only started smoking to do something with my hands because I was eating too much. I was 311 pounds and I was eating too much, right? And so I decided, well, people say I'll lose weight and this way I'll keep my hands active. And I started smoking. And the next thing you know, I was 2 packs a day of cigarettes, just like my father, right? I am my father's daughter. But I'm very grateful that my sister, for my Christmas present, put the patches in my stocking and I tried it. And, you know, for the years that I said when I went to bed, that was my last cigarette, and wake up in the morning, the first thing I did was light a cigarette. That one time when I actually started that snowball of quitting smoking, like actually taking the action of quitting smoking, not just waking up and going for a cigarette and go, oh, Cindy, you're such a loser. Right? I put that patch on and I stayed on it. And because I put that action into it, I manifested it. Right? And I was able to quit smoking pretty painlessly. And I was 2 packs a day. And I was highly stressed, right? Right? 311 pounds. Right? 27 years old. Oh my goodness. I'm just looking back at my life, how difficult that was. I have no idea how I came out of that with my insanity, but I'm going to attribute it to my father, my sisters, and my good friends. It is the people that you surround yourself with that will lift you up in the times that you're down, and that's the truth, and will reflect back to you quite often what you really are and not what's outside of you is thinking about you, right? That's where that saying comes. Don't worry about what other people think, right? Just carry on. And and if you find people and you bring them into your life and they're your friends, right, you won't have to worry about that other stuff, right? Right, because that's not how you make friends. And that's something we all need. And that's a truth. It's never a truth that I've never denied. But now, where I'm at in my life, I suspect that being the dynamic person that I am myself, that it would take somebody else just as dynamic or more dynamic than me, right? And so we just move on. We just carry on, right? And we make the best life for ourselves in the limitations that we're in the moment, understanding they're only in the moment. And if we want to put that action and make that movement towards that, right? That's something that can only serve us well because, you know, if you don't move towards that goal, there's no chance of achieving it at all, is there? Right? At least if you're moving, there's always a shot, and I'm never going to stop moving. And that's the truth. So, in talking and parenting, I think it's probably one of the most crucial things in the problems that we have in this world right now. And everybody's trying to keep everybody so busy in that attention and in other topics and other crises and disasters and stuff, that the things that really matter, like, the human race existing, right? That, for generations down the road, that my family could actually be able to move along and learn and finally come out of whatever, right, mindset that they were in that lifetime, into a lifetime where it suits them better. It's better for everybody. And that, you know, there is a point that we're either all going to rub each other terribly, or we're going to all rub each other amazingly, right? But I still think that's still a ways away. It's starting now, but right to that state, it's still a long ways away. But yeah, to look at parenting, sometimes I think that it might be a good idea if the government stepped in on that, because I'm looking for solutions and parents can't help. Parents don't recognize what they're doing, and they just don't care. Don't tell me how to raise my kid, right? Whoopsie. So let me grab this. So it's going to be up to us to make that movement and to be that example for others, right? And the government may have to step in on it, because it has to be uniformed all across the board, no matter what country you live in. It just can't be acceptable, because it breaks the hearts to the people that have to witness, right? I remember those crises with Somalia, when there'd be commercials on TV to raise money to feed the children and everything, with the droughts and everything, and it broke my heart. It just broke my heart. But you know what? It doesn't have to be that way, because the strong should be taking care of the weak. And you have to understand, the weak isn't all weak. They're only weak in what you're strong in. There's some food for thought. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. Have a great night. That's Friday. I won't be back until till Monday. If you want to come hang out with us on Sunday night, though, that's a different live show. That's my Chatters Live. I have a great crew over there. They've been with me for a decade. I swear. They've all, right? These amazing people who've been with me for a decade. It just blows my mind, in it, right? And it warms my heart that I'm not in this alone, right? And that even though that physical relationship in friendships are maybe not present, you do the best that you can. There's always that fall back into my friendships and relationships with my sisters, and that, and that relationship with myself, I am good with that too. But it's important for us to be social, right? It is really important for us, because how do we make babies, right? Yeah, I'm gonna say you're gonna do it in the tube, they're gonna grow up in a machine, and right, what kind of fun is that? Right? What kind of fun is that? You guys, come and hang out Sunday. If not, I'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend.